Welcome to The Intentional Way, where literally every moment is a step towards purposeful living. I'm Bryan Hatch, here to explore the power of intention with you. Learn from our guests who embody intentionality. I'm glad you're here with me. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of The Intentional Way. I'm excited. I'm here with an amazing guest, someone that has come in my life recently and has been a blessing. A really cool guy. Has done, I don't even know how many triathlons and Ironmans and so many other things, but he works for ProSci Consulting. He's an incredible human being, works with big companies, executive teams, and does a lot of work that way, but is also, in my opinion, just an amazing, intentional human being, takes care of a lot of things at home. And I'm just excited to share with you a guy that I have a lot of respect for, Adam Sharp. And Sharp, welcome to the episode today.
Thanks, Bryan. Good to be here.
Yeah. Well, I always like to start it off with a little bit of an interesting question. People could look you up on LinkedIn. People could look you up and get to know you per whatever online profile they want to look at. But tell us something that a person wouldn't know about you unless they knew you really well. Something unique or interesting about you that might not come up very easily.
All right. Well, I guess something that not many people probably know is that I grew up with 5 younger sisters.
All right.
So the story there was that when I was arriving, my parents had a discussion about what should we name our son? And my mom said, I'd like to have a son named Adam. And my dad said, well, I'd like to have a son named John. Apparently there's a lot of Johns in the family. So my mom won. She won that battle.
Yeah.
And my dad acquiesced and said, all right, we'll name our second son John. And after 5 attempts, they said, all right, we surrender. There's no John. But yeah, I have 5 younger sisters. They're all amazing mothers. They all have at least 4 kids. So my parents have 30 grandchildren.
Wow.
So family reunions are a great and crazy time. But yeah, I'm super proud of them and love them. The thing I'm most proud of, though, and this will sound a little bit curious, but all of my sisters lettered in at least one sport in high school.
Okay.
So I feel like I've done my job as an older brother. And yeah, they're all great people and great mothers and wives.
So you grew up in a house with a lot of females. So how was that? What was that like growing up?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, my dad and I were really close because we kind of had to be.
Yeah.
We had to stay together to keep the gang off to the side a little bit. We did a lot of things, he and I, camping and cycling and those kinds of riding 4-wheelers and things like that. I always felt very close to all of the members of my family, but my dad in particular, simply because we kind of had to keep each other sane, I guess. But, it was, I don't know any other way. So I'd say it was a little crazy. I would definitely stay away from the girls' bathroom area. There's all kinds of things that guys just really shouldn't be a part of in that bathroom. And it was a scary, kind of frightening place.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
What kind of brother were you? With 5 sisters, what kind of brother were you? How would they describe you in your youth? Like when you were old enough to be aware, teenage years, what would they say? They were smaller, but still.
Yeah. I'd say they'd probably say I was hopefully kind of fun. I mean, we had a good time. We'd wrestle a lot. We'd jump on the trampoline. I'd make them play defense against me, running routes or playing catch with my dad, or we had a little basketball set up in the driveway kind of thing. I'd say probably active and, pretty supportive. I used to make sure they all felt appreciated and loved on Valentine's Day and,
all right.
Things like that. And I still reach out pretty often and just check in on them and make sure they're getting their workouts in and eating their vegetables and things like that.
So you said that each one of them lettered. It sounds like you lettered in multiple, I'm guessing,
A few,
because
yeah.
of what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Was that something that your parents instilled in you guys? Were you just athletic? I know you're athletic, but how was that?
Yeah, I don't think my parents ever really pushed sports. They probably pushed just activity generally. I'd actually say, and this is something that not many people would know about me, and I'm not even sure I should admit this, but my mom most likely wanted me to be like a singer, actor, more in the theater kind of space.
Okay.
When we were little, I have uncomfortable memories of her putting us into talent shows. And she and her mom would take some material and make me a shirt and all of my sisters matching dresses out of the same piece of material, put us in talent shows and things like that. So I think she would probably have rather that I be a more of an actor kind of or a singer. And my dad was primarily focused on church and work kind of things. He
Okay.
always had a church leadership role ever since I was young enough to remember. He was sitting on the stand in church. That was kind of his focus, not really pushing sports. I just loved being physical and active, and it just kind of was part of me ever since I was little, and they supported me in what I wanted to do.
Yeah. So I want to bridge that gap a little bit into some of the things that I've seen you be super intentional about in your life. Obviously, physical activity is a part of what I've experienced in our relationship. Did you play college sports? What got you into loving it? Maybe that was high school, but after high school, what kept you in it?
Yeah. Well, I did have some success as a youth in sports. A neighbor of mine and a good friend of mine still today, he and I would play catch with the football just at the park across the street kind of thing when we were growing up. And it turned out that we both signed up for football. And, as junior high kind of peewee stuff, we never lost.
Oh, okay.
And John, his name is John Griffith.
There's your John.
Yeah. There's the John, right?
There's the John.
He and I, for years, had call a play, and we'd change it in the huddle and score a touchdown and come in, and he'd be like, well, where'd that come from? And we'd be like, well, that came from the park across the street. We looked at the defense and we knew what was going on. So in high school and as a youth, I had, I think, athletic success. There was actually an article or a news reporter came out to the house to do an article on me because of the success that I had in high school as playing football. And he wrote a very nice article in the Seattle Times, published it, and said something about how I was a terrific high school athlete and things like that, and said something about kind of limited me in a way, like maybe a D2 kind of athlete. And I remember I read it and I wasn't upset. It just kind of lit a little bit of a fire. And I decided, I think I'm going to prove that guy wrong. And so that kind of lit the fire for me to continue athletic pursuits after high school and really focus a little bit more on being excellent as opposed to, just pretty good.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting that the naysayers in life motivate? And I think it's useful in someone, not that we want to hear that someone doesn't think that we could do it. But when we hear something like that, it could either inspire us or tell us, no, I don't really care. But if it does inspire us, it usually seems like it pushes us further than any positive.
Yeah. And I'm not at all equating myself to Tom Brady. That's not where I'm going. But I do often kind of relate to that just a little bit because he always had that kind of chip on his shoulder, like people telling him he wasn't fast enough or good enough. And that fueled him. So I think there is definitely something to that.
Well, same thing with Michael Jordan. He would make up controversy before a game saying, this guy said something about me that you find out later that the guy never said it.
Right.
He just needed something to get him inspired. Like, I'm going to show this guy.
Yeah. And I do think there's something to that. And then also, I do think I enjoy just a little bit of, I'm going to say, stretch, butterflies, things that make me a little bit nervous. So that's what kind of got me into the Ironman things that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And just almost anything that kind of makes me a little bit nervous. I find that to be motivating and inspiring and something that I just want to go after and tackle.
Well, I want to jump into the Ironman stuff, but first I want to respond to what you just said.
Okay.
That you like the things that give you a little bit of butterflies. So right now in your life, like I know a bit about the things you've already done. For me, like all of them give me butterflies, right? But what gives you butterflies now? What are you thinking about that's putting you to your edge?
Yeah. Well, I almost always have something on the calendar, and I'm going to say athletically or physically that makes me nervous.
Okay.
The next one that's on the calendar at this point is Rim to Rim, which Grand Canyon, which I think I might be able to talk you into.
I'm tucked in. I'm nervous.
Hopefully that's on the calendar. But I always like having something. And there's a book called The Comfort Crisis that put a label on what I had been doing for a while. And the author calls it the misogi.
Mm-hmm.
So what is that thing that you've got kind of a 50-50 chance of being successful at, but it makes you nervous? And the only rule is that you can't die, which is a good rule to have, I would think.
Yeah.
So yeah, coming up this year in a couple months, Grand Canyon is the target.
Where, or tell us the experience that pushed you closest to, it didn't matter, like, I get maybe it's not your edge anymore, but what was the experience you had that took you to the absolute edge of like, I don't know that I could do this? I'd love to know about that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I can picture that vividly. It was in Louisville, Kentucky, and it was the first Ironman that I was involved in.
Roughly how long ago was this?
I'd say it was probably 2012.
Okay.
2012. And I just started, maybe I was 2 years into triathlon, and I signed up for this Ironman. I was in Connecticut at the time, and this event was in the summer in Kentucky. And it just happened to be an extremely warm and humid day. So the swim went fine. It was in the Ohio River, which is not probably a terrific place to swim, but I survived that. The bike was fine, except that they ran out of water to hand to the athletes on the course. So if you wanted water, you kind of had to stop. There were some people that had hoses that would fill up your water.
Hoses?
Just garden hoses.
Wow.
And so I knew something was probably a little wrong because I probably wasn't well enough hydrated, and I was sweating a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it got to the marathon part, it started getting me a little nervous because I could tell I wasn't quite right. And if you go into a marathon knowing that you're not quite right, that's a little concerning. And so I was there. It was 2 loops, if you will. I did the first loop, and I was starting the second loop, and there was a gentleman in front of me, and I just happened to be focused on him, and I was just kind of jogging. I'll keep pace with this guy in front of me, and I can still picture it vividly. Something clicked inside of this guy in front of me, and he turned off like a light switch, and he crumbled to the ground on the pavement. And I saw his head bounce like a basketball, and like he was literally out. And there were people there that kind of rushed to his aid. I paused for a minute, but I needed to keep going. And it was then when I started thinking, all right, I've got to be careful here because I'd rather not turn off like that guy just did. And I don't know what happened to him. I'm hopeful that he was fine. I probably would have heard about it if he wasn't. But that was when I realized I think I'm pretty close to the edge. And to continue that, I'll tell you a little further on, and maybe probably 3/4 into the run portion, I got to this place where I was feeling a little dizzy, and I found a barricade that was blocking the road, traffic from getting on that road. I found this barricade, and I leaned up against it. I put my hands up on this barricade, and I just kind of leaned up against it and closed my eyes for a second. And this white van pulled up. And this was the white van that was picking up people that had surrendered or given up or collapsed, whatever it was. And they opened the door to this van, and they said, "You need a ride?" And I looked at them and I said, "Not yet, fellas. I'm going to keep going." That was the moment where I was like, all right, I need to finish this. And so that whole experience was very difficult. The run portion of that Ironman was very challenging. And I was very close to the edge. But I will tell you that when I finished that Ironman and, the lights and the crowd and the music, it changed me as a human.
Hmm.
And I realized then that I could do anything that I set my mind to do, that I would never surrender or give up on anything that I intended to do. And it literally changed me, almost like it reminded me of like the birth of my children, where I wasn't a dad and then I was, and that I will always be a father. When I finished that first Ironman, I was a different person.
Wow. To be that close to the edge, following a guy that turns off, and then how close was that van to you? I'm wondering, is there like a cleanup crew that kind of follows the last person? Are you at the tail end of this, or are you kind of mid and they just happen to be close to you? It sounded the way you described it, that they were very close to you.
Yeah, I think there were probably maybe a few vans that were
Oh,
picking
okay.
up people.
Okay.
The did not finish rate for that Ironman was close to 30%,
Wow.
which they do keep track of those things, and that's very unusual, very
What's a
high,
typical rate?
more in the 5
Oh,
to,
wow.
usually single digit
Oh, okay.
or
Yeah, that's
even lower.
massive.
Yeah. The weather, the conditions played a huge role in that. And I saw people frequently throughout the day that just gave up without actually being physically incapable of continuing. They just mentally couldn't do it. But there were several vans, so it wasn't like the van at the end. It was just a van that just happened to be there when they saw me kind of lean up against the barricade there, and
Okay.
they thought, well, here's another one to take off the course.
Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe, follow, and download our episode. Your support allows us to bring more intentional guests just like this, and it means the world to us. Now, let's get back to the episode. Yeah. So it changed your life, you said. From that point on, you learned that you could do anything that you intended to do. What opened up in your life at that point? Like what that changed internally, what externally started to change in your life?
Yeah, well, and I'm gonna characterize it just a little bit, that I think a lot of us have limiting beliefs about ourselves, or stories that we tell ourselves about what we can or can't do. And I hear it all the time from people that I associate with, where they have maybe their parents told them something like, you're either good at this or you're not good at that, or yeah, you could probably do that, or no, I wouldn't do that. What this did for me was it made it very clear to me that whatever I decide to do, I can accomplish. And where you're going with your question about what external things, it got me thinking about just different opportunities that I could explore, even not in the athletic, not in a physical arena, but in more of a career, financial arena. And then also helping my kids not have or get over or make sure that they don't have any of those limiting beliefs that have kept them or held them back from attempting things that they want to, but just don't have the courage or the internal belief to attempt.
How do you acknowledge or see limiting beliefs in yourself then?
Honestly, if they ever sneak in, I just dismiss them.
Okay.
They're gone. If anyone says to me, hey, do you want to try this, or have you thought about doing this? If I want to, I'll do it. It's not I don't, I'm sure that the human in me has subconscious, potentially limiting beliefs that are just in there. But when they do appear, I dismiss them.
So walk us through what that sounds. Give me an example. Maybe it doesn't happen very often anymore. I don't know. But give me an example of what that would look like in real life.
Yeah.
You're driving, you're flying, tell me an example.
Yeah. How about this? I'm talking to a neighbor, and my neighbor describes a very challenging event or a very challenging thing that he wants to do. I'll be very specific. My brother-in-law and I were talking a couple months ago, and he mentioned that a friend of his, that he and a friend and a couple other folks were going to go attempt to summit Mount Rainier.
Okay.
And he said that one of his friends was training and broke his ankle and wasn't going to be able to do it. And he said, "Do you think you'd be interested, or would you like to go?" And I said, "Sure, let's do it." And it was 3 weeks away.
Okay. Yeah.
So very little training. I think most people would probably say, whoa, and at least consider, can I do that? Can I not do that? But for me, and I don't mean to say that I don't have any, like, even caution,
Sure.
because I don't think that I'm necessarily reckless. If I really truly wasn't prepared or thought that I could do it, I would have declined. But for most things, if I get an invitation to something and I'm interested, I'll say yes, and then I'll figure out a way to do it. And that's just an example of something that happened recently.
So when your brother-in-law asked you to come, a thought that you could have had would have been limiting belief, the way you're defining it. I'm just trying to get an example.
Yeah.
So you decided it, but was there ever something internally that said, yeah, I don't know if that's smart, dude? Because what I'm hearing you say and what I'm experiencing in just who you are is that you're always training. You're always on a bike, running, doing something, training, working out. You're not a guy that's like, oh, I haven't been to the gym in 6 months. So yeah, Rainier, I don't know. So maybe it doesn't occur as fast because you're like, I'm in shape. 3 weeks, I'm going to have to do something different in my training. But was there any other thought besides, yeah, I'm all in? Or was there a doubtful? Because you said limiting belief, you cast it out. Sounds like you didn't even have any limiting beliefs in this scenario. And I just want to make sure I understand.
Yeah. I would say that initially, you're right. I think I just said, yeah, I can do that. Let's do it.
Yeah.
And I grew up in Seattle, so I grew up looking at, I always thought, oh, that'd be pretty cool. So initially, I think I did just jump on it without really much, if any, hesitation. I will also tell you that after agreeing to it and then starting to study and read up about it, there were all kinds of cautions and warnings and, hey, those kinds of things, where a little bit of doubt might have, and certainly crept in, like, ooh, yeah, I haven't been training for any of this. The first time that I wear these boots will likely be, as we start going, right? Those types of things. So yeah, I do think you're right. I think I've trained it. I think I've trained it out of my initial thinking, but sometimes it does creep in. I'll give you another example. Serena and I went with our two youngest up to the Grand Canyon just to check it out. And we thought we might hike a little bit. And we were at the South Rim, and this was, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago or so. And we looked at it and we thought, oh, wow, it's just amazing. And then we said, well, let's start going. Let's start hiking and see what happens. And we ran into someone and they said, well, yeah, we're going down South Kaibab, and then we're going to go up Bright Angel. So we're going to go to the Colorado River. And we started seeing all these signs that were like, don't do it.
A guy that looks like he's puking and dying.
Yeah.
That's my favorite.
The information about the helicopter ride out of the Grand Canyon is not free, those kinds of things. And a little doubt started creeping in, but then just dismissed it. And so we did the south down Kaibab and up Bright Angel just because it was there. And I don't think it was reckless, but it wasn't really something that we thought about, and certainly didn't pay attention to the signs that say, hey, you should think about this a couple times before you do it.
Yeah. Oh, there's so many things. The thing that's interesting is those signs are meant to dissuade people that aren't ready. And again, knowing a little more about you and your family, like not a single one of you isn't fit, or at least doing something active to where if you did that, but that's interesting. Now, I want to come back to a concept that you have brought up a couple times. I've heard you say whatever you wanted to instill in your kids, the ability to decide. And you said decide. And after you said casting out the limiting beliefs. So what's your process for deciding to do something that you want to do that might be challenging?
Honestly, it's pretty simple. Decide, make a plan, and execute the plan. It's just remarkably simple, honestly. I don't, once I, in fact, a lot of people will ask me when they get to know me a little bit and they get to know kind of my routine and the fact that I probably do work out most days except for Sunday.
Mhm.
I'd say every day except for Sunday. There's something going on. When people find that out about me, they say, how do you have that mental fortitude, that determination, the grit to do that every day? And I say, I don't. I decided once.
Mm.
I decided one time, and that's all I needed. That was the only decision that I made. And now I just execute. I just follow through on that decision. And so that I think that's something that I do pretty regularly is if I'm going to change something, a habit or insert a routine, I make the decision and then I just do it. It's just have the fortitude to make a new decision every day. I just make one.
When did you make the decision to start working out every day?
Yeah, actually that I'll tell you about that. That happened to me at a very, very vivid moment to me. I was doing my second triathlon ever. The first triathlon I did was a sprint distance. I did it with my son Trevor, who was 9 at the time, and he and I did it together. And we were on little mountain bikes, and we had no clue what we were doing. And I signed up for an Olympic distance race, just a little bit longer. And I thought, well, maybe it was Trevor. Maybe it was my first time. I'm sure I could do better. And the swim was okay. The bike was fine. I was on the run and I was coming around this corner. And up ahead of me, as I came around the corner, a group of kids started cheering, like going crazy when I came around the corner. And I was like, oh, hey, that feels pretty good. That's really nice of them. And then as I got closer, I heard what they were saying. And they were saying, go grandma. And I looked like just behind me, to the right of me, and there was this little old lady, and she was shuffling like this and running right with me. And I thought, that's not going to happen ever again. That will not happen. And so, oddly enough, that little lady and her grandkids, who were probably cheering for her as she came around the corner, really inspired me. And I decided right then that I was going to get good at that and that I was never going to be running with a grandma, the same pace as a grandma. So that was really a moment that kind of snapped it for me.
I still think it's interesting that it comes back to that negative feeling a little bit. And she wasn't doing anything negative towards it. She didn't egg you on and say, you can't do this old little guy. No, but it's still the experience of, whoa, I'm not going to be pace step by step with a grandma next time I do this. So that's when you decided, hey, I'm in it. I'm going to be good at this.
Yep.
Therefore, the training plan, the regiment must exist. I've got to work.
Yeah. And I've probably, and I don't really keep track of it because there's no need. Ever since then, I've probably worked out every day in some way, shape, or form. Every day since then. Doesn't matter if I'm traveling, feeling sick. In fact, sometimes if I don't feel well, my answer is I just need a hard, long workout. And I just need to replace all the bad water in my cells and let's just flush it out with a good, sweaty, hard workout and I'll be fine. So I think I've been as close to 100% as you can be ever since then.
That's amazing. And that's how many years ago now? This is a long-term habit.
Oh, yeah, probably at least 12, maybe a little more, 12 years or so. Yeah. In fact, I was talking about this with my son just the other day. We were talking about how sometimes things can get busy, obviously, and priorities. We were just talking about just making investing in yourself and your health a priority. And I've met people who have said, this is important and this is important and all these things are important. And then taking care of themselves falls quite low on that list. And he and I were talking about how unfortunate that is, and that one of my top priorities, and I have several, but one of my top priorities is making sure that I am the best version of me, and that health wise and fitness wise, that I'm on top of my game.
That's awesome. The first triathlon, well, the most intentional triathlon I've ever been a part of. I did one years ago that was really haphazard. I did it because I needed to do it. Did it with you, and you won the triathlon. In your age group, you took it. You got the gold medal on the podium, and that's what's fun, is training with you is no joke. So the work that you've done over the last 12 years to work out every day is next to none. I've been out there on the bike with you. I've been out there a run with you, and I don't think, besides hiking, I don't think that I've ever kept pace with you. And maybe that was because you were taking it easy on the hike. I don't know.
I will also, I hope that this is also part of how people will think about me. And that is that I also like to work out with other people and be part of their journey, if you will, their fitness journey. So there are a lot of times where people will say, oh, I'd like to go on a run. And I say, well, let's do it. And they say, well, you're faster than me. And I'm like, that's okay. I'll participate with just about anybody to help them get that love of fitness. I try not to be kind of a fitness snob, like, well, I can't work out with you because you're not fast enough or you're not going to go long or whatever. I've done that with my kids, where if they want to go on a workout, if they want to go work out with me, I make it intentional and I try to make it challenging, but I don't necessarily make it so that they can't even participate. So hopefully.
That's cool. Well, I think on the fitness side, there's several questions we could keep diving down, because I think it's fascinating the way that you've done it. I will point out this. At minimum, what we've exposed, and I don't think that it's anything crazy to expose, is that you have created a life that is set with physical activity. You don't have to remake that decision. You don't have to create it again. So the deciding is a really important factor. And then you set a plan and stick with it, which I think is a lot of people falter on that. Like they'll make the decision and the plan is 3 weeks long, and then I got to make another decision. And I don't even know if I'm going to make it at the end of 3 weeks, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of decisions. So maybe that's something that I would point out, that if you can decide and stick with, that's far more important than consistent having to decide. I think that wears us down of decision fatigue. So on the fitness side, we could go as far as you want. Is there anything more you want to say on fitness, Adam?
No.
There's so much we could go on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, fitness is just a component, right? I do think some people get over-focused on it, and that can lead to just life being out of balance. So fitness doesn't necessarily define me. It's just part of what I focus on.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to jump ship a little bit here, knowing that's a big part of your life, but it's not the only part of your life. As soon as I've met you and I've known you over the last few years, you've been very thoughtful about the family culture you have. I've noticed that's the way that I define it. I'm not saying that's the way you define it. So tell me, what have you done in your family? Because I feel like you've got a pretty unique scenario where I'll just juxtapose with what I'm used to seeing. And there's tons of good people in the spectrum of like how your family is. It varies degrees on every level. So it doesn't mean that you have the only family worth having.
Yeah, certainly.
But I've seen that you've got well-adjusted kids that know how to make decisions for themselves, that work hard. I've seen that in each one of them, and I don't think I'm that close to any one of them, but I've seen that. And it seems like everybody in your family is able to like figure out life's challenges and keep moving forward. Whereas sometimes we get knocked down and drug out, and it's a little different. So that's my outside. I'm not in your home. I don't know, but what have you done to make such a cool family the way you have?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the classification of a cool family. I would agree. I think my wife and I, Serena and I, have been blessed with some amazing kids, and she and I are also a good team when it comes to this kind of thing. So I'll share a philosophy or a couple of things with you, but they're not mine alone. obviously I have to have a partner, and I do in Serena. And so we discuss these things together. So I'll focus on just two things. The first one, and you mentioned it, is just general work ethic. And I'm going to back up to when I was a kid just to kind
Yeah.
of tell you where it started. When I was growing up, my dad purchased a piece of property. It's about 3.5 acres in the Redmond, Washington area. There was a house on it, but that was about it. And at one point, he told us we were building a barn in the backyard. And I was nearby when he was talking to our neighbor about building this barn. And I heard him say, when my neighbor asked, "Why are you building a barn?" he said, "Because my kids don't have enough chores."
That's awesome.
And I thought, oh, well, and I remember thinking, that's kind of interesting. But then over time, I realized we had horses and we had chickens and we had rabbits and we had all these animals. It was just more of a hobby farm. But the only intention there was that we learned how to work. And Serena and I replicated that to some extent in Connecticut, where our kids essentially grew up. We lived in Connecticut for a lot longer than we anticipated, but the work that I was doing was just terrific, and there was no real compelling reason for us to leave. We ended up purchasing about a 10-acre piece of property in Connecticut, mainly just woods. And there was a little creek that ran through there.
That's cool.
And just about every week, we would come up with something that we needed to do around the yard. And there was always something to do with that amount of space. And so my kids grew up working with us outside in the yard, and they would work hard. And then we would also play hard. So during the winter, when there wasn't a whole lot that you could do outside, we would go skiing, snow skiing every weekend.
Okay.
Without fail. And the kids loved it and we loved it. And it was great to be outside and active. And all of my kids are terrific skiers, which I know I live in Phoenix now, and there's probably not a whole ton of terrific skiers in Phoenix. But the nice thing about skiing is that you spend time skiing and then you spend about half the time or maybe even more on the chairlift, talking to your kids about life and struggles and what's going on. And so I think the first thing that I would highlight about just the family culture is just that work ethic, working together and playing together. And that I think has been really important. The other thing that I would throw out there is we as a family made a decision to focus on service and giving back. And there was a pivotal moment when Serena and I looked at our summer calendar and we realized that there wasn't a family reunion and there wasn't a wedding and there wasn't something on the calendar. And we started talking about what we could do, like what we could do for the summer. And we kicked around the usual suspects, go to the beach or go to Disney or those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And what we ended up exploring and then ultimately doing was we went on a volunteer mission trip, and it had nothing to do with church. It was just we found a company out of New Zealand that vetted volunteer opportunities around the world, made sure that they were legitimate and safe and all those kinds of things. And then we would just sign up. And so we took our kids when they were actually quite young. I think our oldest Mackenzie was probably 14 and Corinne was probably 7. And we took them to Nairobi, Kenya. And we spent almost a month living at an orphanage about 45 minutes outside of Nairobi. And we just fell in love with the kids. And we realized that the quality of your life is often highly correlated to how much you give, not how much you get. And so that was a pivotal moment for us where you mentioned the kids being adjusted or well adjusted, getting them outside of their comfort zone and outside of the country and seeing kids who are happy and have literally nothing. It can permanently adjust your perspective as a kid and as they grow into young adults and start making their own decisions. I think that perspective and that focus on serving other people has continued.
How often have you done things similar to that? I mean, that seems like you said it was a month.
Yeah.
How many times have you done something similar, regardless of the length of time?
I'd say frequently.
Okay.
And my wife is actually kind of the spearhead of a lot of these things, but she has us working at soup kitchens and volunteering and in all sorts of ways almost constantly. She's very focused on that. And that's how my kids grew up. Thanksgiving wasn't about us, it was about going to the homeless shelter and spending the morning with folks there. And I do have to give Serena a lot of that credit. I know I was involved and I was a happy participant, but she tended to organize a lot of those things. To your point, some big ones, obviously those bigger trips. We did that in Africa, like I mentioned, also in Xi'an City, China, and in Quito, Ecuador over subsequent years. Those were the bigger ones. But then just as meaningful were the smaller opportunities that we took to just help other people and to make a little bit of a difference.
What do you think your kids would say? And I'm sure they have said, what would they say about those experiences? Maybe even Corinne, your youngest.
Yeah. We were flying back from Africa and I was sitting on the plane next to Jared and he was 9, I think. And he's coming back from a month in Africa, living at an orphanage and serving these kids. And I asked him just casually, what do you think? And he said, it seems like the world just got a whole lot smaller. And now I have friends in Africa. And I thought he didn't think that was meaningful, but I sure did. And I think the kids, they all got that perspective of we're, this is a planet of people that all basically want the same thing, right? They want to feel loved and they want to be happy and they love their family. And those are all things, just human traits. A lot of times in the United States in particular, we get very myopic. We're very myopic in terms of it's the United States and that's all we think about, that's all we care about. Instead of expanding our thinking and appreciating and loving and enjoying other cultures. So I think that all of our kids and would say that those experiences change that perspective. It also gave them a measure of confidence. There are a lot of kids who never even leave their state, who don't necessarily know what it means to go through an international airport and try to figure that madness out. And I think it was a couple Christmases ago, as we were approaching Christmas, one of our kids called and said, hey, just so you know, we're all going with some friends to Guatemala over Christmas and New Year's to build a house. So have a nice Christmas. We clearly weren't invited. And after we got over being offended by that, we realized, hey, this is a good thing that our kids are continuing that focus, even without us saying, hey, we're going to this place. They have that perspective and they have that courage to just say, yeah, I'm going to book a flight to Guatemala with some friends and I'm going to figure it out. And we're going to build somebody a house. And then we're going to come home and we're going to get back to life. That week or a week and a half between Christmas and New Year's, we're going to focus on somebody else. And I was super proud of them for doing it.
How many of your kids did that?
Well, 3 of them, and the only one that didn't was Jared, and that was because he was on a mission.
Yeah,
so.
That makes sense. It's awesome. Well, we've talked a lot about the experiences you've had, what you've done in your family, and what you've done in fitness. Where else do you feel like intention matters, or you put a lot of focus into in that part of your life?
I think the other component is just around faith. And I think that's definitely one of the top aspects or things that I focus on. We talked a lot about fitness already, and that's certainly a consideration. But my faith and my relationship with God is something that is certainly a top priority and that I'm very intentional about each day. I have in my office at home just a list of kind of a personal mission statement and different affirmations. And I really sincerely try, although I often come short, but I try to do my best to follow the example of the Savior and just treat people the way that I think he would treat them. And particularly when it comes to just children, just generally, I think he had a particular love for little people, and I do too. And actually, now that I think about it, I'll connect that to the service trips that we went on. In Africa, we went to an orphanage. In China, we just held babies at an orphanage there. And in Quito, we just worked with street children. So all of that focus was on kids, but I'd hope that I'm just as intentional about my faith and my focus on just being more like the Savior. And I'd hope that focus is just as significant in my life as fitness might be.
So how in the following the Savior, how have you managed to become thoughtful and purposeful in that? What are some of the things you do? You said affirmations is one, but what are some of the things that keep you connected? Like you got the daily habit of fitness. What else do you do?
Yeah. I think the daily habit of fitness is probably right in line with the daily habit of just prayer and scripture study. I know that sounds elementary, but those are things that I do take seriously and that I do focus on. I'm not necessarily what I would describe as a scriptorian. I don't spend hours, and maybe I should, but I don't tend to spend hours in the scriptures. But I do tend to spend time focused on what the scriptures are telling me that I should be doing. And also, in that same vein, and I'm going to call it prayer, but I'll also just call it meditation, because sometimes I think that we define prayer as something limited, where it's like where we're sitting there, folding our arms, bowing our head, and that's prayer. But I think prayer can be defined much more broadly, and that's when we're thinking about, or even just mentally in our minds, having a conversation with God about things. And I think I spend a good amount of time doing that, thinking about those heroes in the scriptures that I read about and how they would respond or what they might do. Some of those, and I think that's why we have the scriptures, is so that we can take advantage of the example of and the experiences that people who lived long ago, their experiences and their interactions and connections with God and with the Savior.
So if I zoom out a bit, I'm hearing in each level of your life, like there is, and this is so topical, but it's still interesting to see, like in the fitness category of your life, there's a daily consistent effort, right? In the family part of your life, one of the things that seems like is consistent, whether it's daily or not, is service and helping other people, right? That was a theme that you mentioned. And within the following the Savior, that sounds like there is a focus to stay apparent to that, be in the effort, be in the work of it, because that is what I'm experiencing is you are an athlete. You're a good family. You're a good father. You're a good, whatever it is, right? Or you're a good follower of Christ. You only become those things with consistent effort. Doesn't mean the outcomes are always going to be perfect, but you don't become an athlete by going and working out once a month.
Right.
You don't.
Right.
Not that you couldn't be athletic, but you don't become an athlete. You don't become a triathlete by any stretch by doing one biking activity per month.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you wouldn't mind, you don't have to share this, but I thought it was so fascinating when we connect it to the spirituality and following the Savior. I think it's interesting how you even came here. If you're willing to share that story, because I think that's fascinating that you had never, we were in Queen Creek, Arizona, and you've never heard of that before.
Right.
Are you willing or open to sharing how you came here? Because you were in Connecticut, life was good. Did you have to move? I don't remember the circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll share that. And it is arguably one of the more spiritual moments, right? Experiences that I've had in my life that I do lean on and look back on, because I do think coming here, to your point, was something that I feel and that Serena and I both feel was really orchestrated by God, that it was supposed to happen. So here's the background. Our two oldest, Mackenzie and Trevor, had just gotten home from their missionary service. They actually got home literally on the same day. And then we said hello. They slept in their own bed for one night, and we left to go be in the Palmyra, the Hill Cumorah pageant, which actually ended up being the last year that the pageant ever happened. So it was the final version of the pageant. And so we packed up and we left, and we camped there. It's called Zion's Camp. It's just right there next to the visitor center at the base of the Hill Cumorah. I would go on my morning runs, and I would literally run to the sacred grove. It was an amazing place, right? Full of just the spirit and, just focused on the Savior. It was a great experience. And the whole time I was praying and looking for guidance around what should my next step be, right? Where should I be going with my life and my career and things like that? We got home, and to be candid, nothing really happened. No moment, no vision, no, nothing. I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel like I got any direction. And I came home from that, and my first day back in the office, for a company that I'd worked with for almost a decade. I come in, first day back from the Hill Cumorah pageant. My boss calls me into we have a one-on-one meeting. He's sitting there with HR, and he says, "Hey, we're going to go in a different direction." And I was like, "What?" Now, there were certain options, and I was at a certain place in my career where that wasn't financially impactful, but it was impactful just mentally, right? I actually felt like I was very good friends with the CEO and a lot of the senior executives at that company. And so it was definitely a bit of a shock. And I thought, wow, as I was processing that, and the fact that I had just spent a week in one of the most sacred places on earth and nothing had happened. And then I get back to the office, I was perplexed by that. I was struggling with it. And I'm not kidding you. I went to the gym. I went to the fitness center. And I had headphones in listening to music, and I was actually listening to church music. And I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I was literally in the gym. And all of a sudden, I sat down on a bench, and I had what I would consider to be, and what President Nelson has coined, a rush of revelation. And I've never experienced anything like that. And it was essentially words came to my mind, and I was told, "You need to move to Queen Creek." And I've got it. I'm in control. This is the plan. I've got you. And I went home. My mom actually was visiting, just happened to be visiting at the time. And I sat down with my mom and my wife, and I said, "Hey, here's what just happened. I was in the gym of all places." And it still makes me shake my head that a week before then, I'd spent 10 days at the Hill Cumorah and in the sacred grove, and nothing happened. And then I end up going to the gym, and I'm in the middle of a workout, and that's when Heavenly Father decided to send a few messages. And luckily, I was in a place where I was just open to receive it. And that's how we ended up here. Like you said, I'd never been here before, barely even heard of it. Had to go to a map and see where it was. But Serena came out here without me. She came out here, found the house that we were supposed to live in, and that was it.
Yeah. Can I add something that I'm seeing in context of that story? The sacred grove wasn't your sacred grove.
Right.
And because of a little bit of what I know of you, workout is sacred to you. But maybe not, I'm not equating the two, but for you, that's a sacred place. That's a place where you are clear. That's a place where you the distractions are limited.
Right.
You're like
Focused.
focused. Like that's your place.
Yeah.
So to me, it sounds very Heavenly Father-like that he would give it to you in your place, not in somebody else's place,
Yeah.
but in a place where you are.
Yeah. I love
That's
that.
fascinating. Yeah,
Actually, I've never even connected that, but that makes a lot of sense.
that's cool. Well, Adam, as we've talked about so many things here, is there any way that is there something that's still on your mind about where you've been intentional in your life? The goal is to teach people how to see stories of human beings that are being intentional and creating intention in their life. Is there any subject that we still need to talk about as we kind of wrap up?
Well, I think one thing that I would just mention as we wrap up here is that the things that we've talked about are absolutely not exclusive or independent of
Mhm.
each other. And you mentioned the connection between that sacred place and my sacred place. And I think that's terrific. I will also tell you that there have been several times where I've been involved in some sort of fitness or just maybe even a workout where that faith or that inspiration or even that service component that we've talked about comes to mind or becomes an opportunity. And I'll share just a quick example about that. I was out riding my bike on the Queen Creek Wash, and it was this last summer, and it was pretty hot, so no one else was really out there. And as I was riding, I saw a kid that was standing off to the side of the trail, picking up rocks and throwing them against the rocks, which obviously made no sense. But it looked like you could tell that there was some frustration. This kid was just working out some frustration. And I rode past. I'm going pretty quick, right? I rode past.
Yeah, very quick. You ride very quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was going quick. And I heard that voice, that inspiration that said that kid needs some help. And you have this moment, right, where you negotiate with yourself a little bit, like, well, I'm on this ride, I got this workout, I'm on a plan, I'm on pace, those kinds of things. And then you realize, all right, that came from somewhere. So I did. I stopped my watch, I turned around, I rode back. I just kind of pulled up and I took my helmet off and I said, hey, how's it going? And he came over and we talked for about 30 minutes. And he was struggling with his parents and struggling with school, and he was feeling a little hopeless and helpless. And we talked, and I shared some things, and I gave him a little bit of encouragement. And at the end, when we were just about done, his phone rang, and he said, well, this is my mom, let me get it. And I was still there, and he said, yeah, I'm okay. He goes, this random citizen just stopped by, and I feel a lot better now. And yeah, I'll be home in a little bit. And I thought, he wasn't on the edge of jumping off a cliff or anything like that I know of. Maybe he was, but he wasn't literally on the edge. There wasn't anything dangerous. He didn't have a gun. He wasn't going to kill himself that I know of. But I think oftentimes those things that we've talked about can merge together. So, I was working out. I paused to help. I felt that inspiration or that motivation to just stop. And so I think that's what makes life is combining those individual things that we talked about. That combining all those things together can just lead to just happiness and fulfillment in life as a whole. So it's not just, if you're super fit, that's okay. But if other things are out of whack, you're probably going to have some challenges. So I think bringing all of those things together, really, at least for me, makes for a full and complete and just a wonderful life experience.
Awesome. Well, Adam, when we think about being intentional, when you think about that, I might think about it. That's the reason why I have titled it this way. I think about it quite often. What is something you could leave with the listeners today that would help them navigate whether there's some people are listening that want to be intentional. They want to be intentional about their life or the scenario or whatever the case is. Others are listening to this thinking, oh, that's interesting. I don't feel like I'm intentional at all. There's other people that are listening from different perspectives. So what would you have the audience understand about what is Adam's way to be intentional?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, that's something that I've discovered, over time is that I might have intention, but the way that I keep the focus on the intention is I literally just post my intention somewhere that I can see it. So I have affirmations and I have my personal mission statement and I have my, things that I focus on that, certain scriptures or certain poems or quotes, Invictus or Theodore Roosevelt's quote about the critic, it's not the critic that counts. I have those things posted in my personal space at home that continually get me focused on those intentional things. So my recommendation would be if you do struggle or if you feel like you want to be more intentional, make it more intentional to be intentional. So put those things around you. Remind yourself constantly of what is your intention? What are you focused on? How do you want to be remembered? What are the things that are the most important to you? And then remind yourself of those on a very regular basis. For me, it's part of my daily routine to wake up, I get a drink of water, and I go into my office and I sit down and I look at those things. So it orients me, it grounds me, it reminds me. And that's, at least for me, that helps me be intentional on a daily and a regular basis.
So as you put in your environment the things that you've said you want to be intentional about, it goes back to your earlier thing, be like making the decision.
Right.
As you make the decision, now put reminding cues up around your space in a way that can have you connect with those things. Remember, yeah, that's what I'm after. That's what I want to accomplish. That's what I want to create. And then from there, a plan is created in some way, shape, or form, and you follow your plan. What a wonderful way to do it.
Yeah. Yep. And it works for me. And I enjoy it and I edit it. I adjust it every once in a while, things that I want to focus on. And I know that's not the only way to do it, right? There are other people that their way of focus is to have some artwork or some pictures or to listen to different music. So there's a variety of ways to do it. That's just the way that works for me.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Well, Adam, it's been a pleasure having you here on the show. Thanks for being here. We appreciate you being on The Intentional Way.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on The Intentional Way. I'm Bryan Hatch, and it's been a true privilege to share this time with you. If today's episode has inspired you in any way, shape, or form, please subscribe, follow, and download our episodes. Your support not only helps us grow, it also enables us to bring more insightful conversations and exceptional guests right to you. Living intentionally begins with a single step, yours. So let's make the most of it. Until next time, seek intention by being completely present.